very proud and happy to have Craig Hanaumi on today. He's a police officer for Bellevue PD in Washington, and he is all about connecting with the community. All you have to do is peruse his Instagram to get a sense of what kind of cop he is. When he's not skateboarding and playing with the local youth, he's prioritizing his defensive tactics training. And maybe the best part about Craig is that he seems to not take himself too seriously. And yet he clearly knows just how important it is to know the population that he serves. So Craig, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I know you were just coming from a call. Are you at work right now?
I'm good to speak with you, Kelly. Thank you guys and Lexi for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Lexi told me a little bit about you, and then I, of course, became one of your almost 50,000 followers on Instagram. So
I hope I can represent. That's all I try to do.
So, Greg, you were a police officer in Hawaii, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your history in law enforcement?
Well, I started with the Honolulu PD in 2003, September 2003, and I worked on the windward side of Oahu on patrol, which is, if you know Oahu, it would be Waimanalo, Kailua, Kaneohe, and Kahuku, Laie Kahuku. So the northwest side of Oahu, and I did that until 2006, and then I relocated to Washington, and I had the good fortune of getting hired by Bellevue PD, and I've been there ever since. So altogether, I don't know, what is that, 16 years or so, something like that.
Given all your work with the community, what made you, was that part of your determination of wanting to become a police officer in the first place?
No, I don't have any cool story about how I became one, but I feel like I always was wanting to connect with whatever job I had with the community. So I think I started doing it on my days off with, there's an alternative learning school that had been run out of a community center in Kalihi called Palama Settlement. And I think I got connected to that because before I was in law enforcement, I was an outreach counselor through the family courts in the YMCA back home. And the kids who had been, I had seen in that, one of them or a few of them went to that alternative learning center. So then I became, and I got into law enforcement and I graduated, and I was like, well, it'd be cool to still connect with those kids in my current job, you know, as a cop. And so I went back, and I wasn't thinking about doing it at the time. I just, you know, I had time on my hands on my days off, and I didn't have any kids back then. And I was like, well, it's a neat thing to do to still build relationships. And I enjoyed it. It's like, I think it was an inherent, you have to enjoy it, right? Otherwise you won't do it. So that started with that. That kept going. I was a band geek all the way to college. So I have a good friend named Ira who taught at a school called the University Laboratory School, which is it's a charter school right next to the University of Hawaii on the Manoa campus. And I walk across the street when I was in college to help out with his programs, low brass section. So the trombones, the tubas, the euphoniums. And I mean, it was a totally different thing, but it's the same concept, you know, just using my hobbies and interests to connect. And I think the only difference now is it's different, same career, but different hobbies and interests. Like, so instead of music, well, I still use music a little bit, but skateboarding and jujitsu.
So when you were a kid, do you remember your impression of police officers as a child?
Yeah, I didn't have any really negative experiences. I skateboarded. So if you skateboard, you can't really have a great connection with law enforcement, especially where we grew up, because there was no skate parks. There's one skate park in downtown Honolulu called A'ala Park. And I guess if you've never been to Oahu or A'ala Park, the closest comparison is probably like going to Pioneer Square. To go down to A'ala Park and meet all the interesting people over there. And I was about in middle school, and we're catching the bus down to that area by ourselves, and it's kind of interesting. And But I never had any super negative interaction with police. But I mean, for our interest, you can't have a. It's hard to have a good one because every place you skateboarded was outside of that place, which is not probably the. It wasn't. It was a roller rink outside that was kind of converted into a skate park unofficially. But every other place, the schools, businesses, the ditches. Wallows is a world famous skateboard ditch, drainage ditch that people skated in. That they're all prohibited, right? You're going at your own risk or you're trespassing, and so in my mind, if we saw a officer or a police car, we had to run away from it because we were probably at a place where we weren't supposed to be. So it was it's kind of hard to get a good connection with that occupation because of what we were doing just by itself. So I remember that, and that I always tell people when I connect with people now, it's I think they look at me kind of sideways because I'm wearing a uniform, right? But I was that kid. I was the kid or the adult who, when they were kids, I remember. I remember what it felt like. So I don't know. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but it does help that I actually can skateboard a little bit, and I'm not just being a poser and holding a board, walking around like pretending.
Well, that makes me think of one of the things I read recently on your Instagram was a text from, it looked like a mom that said that she pulled up to some center and she saw the police cruiser and she got worried that somebody was in trouble. But then she saw a bunch of kids surrounding an officer and realized it was Officer Craig. So you've created an environment where kids are not running away from you, afraid that they might be in trouble, but rather running towards you, which I think is really amazing. So can you talk a little bit how you've fostered that in Bellevue?
Well, it takes time, and I think when people have a criticism about something like that, or not a criticism, but they use our city as like, well, you can do that over there because it's Bellevue, and I mean, I think even my initial perception of our city is different now than how it was because when I first moved up here to Washington, I didn't know anybody here, and I was trying to always make parallels to back home. Like it was like, okay, Pioneer Square is like Ala Park, and Bellevue to me was like a city or area of Oahu, which it's called Hawaii Kai or Kahala, which in those areas are really affluent areas of the island, and that's what I initially perceived, which because I just went downtown and saw the high-end retail down there, but I didn't realize that they have a lot of King County Housing Authority apartment complexes and a lot of fixed and low income first generation families from all over the world, and that kind of actually reminded me of home. So the diversity and everything like that. I think it has to be a conscious decision to make to start to build a relationship because it's hard to do it any other if you just let it happen organically, like without having a conscious thought of trying to build those relationships. It could still happen just from working for 10 years or 15 years, but if you wanted to condense the time and not wait 10 years, then you have to proactively make a point to do it. It's hard in the patrol capacity because you have to respond to 911 calls, but it's still possible for little bits and pieces like the teen center we have. I think it helps that our city has lots of infrastructure to support outreach. The nonprofits like Boys and Girls Club and Salvation Army particularly were really supportive of us being there. So it works out great when they have a bunch of youth at a location. I don't have to individually contact people. I can introduce myself to a whole group at one time, and I don't know. I think in the beginning I just did it because I didn't want to be as homesick. So I was like, well, I can't drive around here and wave to anybody unless I'm trying to just be nice because I won't know anyone, and I didn't know anyone. But so in the beginning I was just trying to do it to at least in my mind trick myself to say, oh, I know that person because I talked to them yesterday. But it ended up being something that initially was not a thing I was good at. I'm probably more of an introvert kind of person, but I eventually ended up being pretty comfortable doing it, which is kind of ironic because like outside of work, I kind of keep to myself. But it's an investment in time that there's not a guaranteed return to. And of course, the return is unknown if or when it will happen. It could be a month or several years from interactions that we have. But the neat thing is when there is a return, it's almost, you can't replicate it. It's almost impossible to purposely try to recreate it. I mean, it either happens just because you genuinely care about the community, or it will be really artificial and people will be able to see through your lack of being genuine.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's incredible. It kind of makes me think of when you think of that return on investment, so to speak, you don't know exactly how you're affecting the people around you, but at the same time, I'm curious if you've thought about the impact you've had on your fellow officers, because I would imagine that that's not necessarily commonplace. I know it's not necessarily commonplace at our department to just go around and take the time out of your day to seek out, the youth, or to talk with, even if it's business owners and that sort of thing. You can find a million excuses not to do that. You have to, like you said, you have to carve out the time to do that. And I'm just curious if you've seen other officers or sort of created a mini culture around that kind of mentality.
Yeah, it is hard. I think the big advantage I have is from my position. I started in 2007 in Bellevue, and in 2012 I put in for a position on one of our storefronts in the mall, Crossroads Mall. And that position, the community station officer, is not as directly tied to 911. So I kind of was doing it part-time, I guess, as a patrol. And I had the luxury also before that of working in the same area for my whole patrol. For 5 years, I was in Crossroads, which we call District 4 of our city. So for 5 years straight, I was able to get to know the community really, really well. And then from the 6th year or the 5th year on, I was assigned to the storefront substation in the same area. So I could further the relationships that I had established from patrol, and I could really start to dig deep. And then I think I started actually doing it as a patrol just because I wasn't good at it. Like I said, I was telling Lexi or both you guys, I moved up here without really knowing anybody, and Bellevue was a completely new city to me. So in patrol, all I would do is drive around and respond to 911 calls. And then when I wasn't, then I would use my NDC to just run license plates all shift long. And that was pretty easy, or look for traffic violations, things that didn't have to require me to meet or get out of my car. And even by doing that, you still get to know people in the community, right? People who call all the time for various reasons, or people who we contact all the time for various reasons. And that was fine. I just, at the point in my career where that was probably coming up to my 6th year total. So 3 years of Honolulu, about my 3rd year in Bellevue, I kind of got, I felt like, okay, I established that I can do that aspect of police work. I can do traffic stops. I can respond to 911 calls. What haven't I explored yet? And I would see people or hear people on the radio contacting people, and the person has some kind of warrant for some domestic violence or assault or robbery. And I was like, man, how did they even do that? Like, how do you even get out of your car and start talking to people? I was not good at that. So I wanted to make it a strength, or a better, at least my ability to do it. So I started, and I tell everybody when I used to be FTO, the same thing is the easiest. What population do you guys think? It's like, I'm not good at talking to people. It's like, all right, so how do you get good at talking to people? You have to do it. You have to actually practice it, right? Ideally live, not as a script or in front of your mirror. Like, do it with real human beings. So which population do you think is the easiest to do that with?
Probably the people that look most like you, or that you're most used to.
That would be one, where you have some kind of automatic connection. So like, if I a group of skateboarders, like, oh, I skated, so I have an automatic thing in common with these people. That's one. More generally speaking, I would say to people, like, you want to start, because the difference between us having a conversation and for our work, right? We have to have a conversation with a direction, a specific focus. Like it can't just be like, I mean, it could be small talk, but if I need to know, or I would like to know who that person is, at some point I would say, I have to ask what their name is. And it's a different vibe from a regular conversation, or it's not the vibe might be the same, but the focus is different because I might have to, like, if I needed to know who that person is and I had no reason to stop or investigate anything, then I have to make them forget I'm wearing a uniform. And that's really hard. So I tell people like all the time, if you want to get good at that, you have to do it. And I was terrible at it in the beginning because I was super awkward. And I got good at it without even purposely thinking of it with the intention of it by talking to kids. I would talk to elementary school age kids at the different apartment complexes, playgrounds, or the parks, because the kids are like that age range. The car is like a magnet, right? They just go right to it, and it's like you almost can't do anything wrong, like, because they're fascinated by the uniform, the badge, the type of work we do, and everything. So it's super easy to get used to interacting with that age range because they can't get enough of it. And then you go past that age range to middle school, high school, it's like the reverse, right? It's like a repellent. But
Yeah.
but so if you start with that, I tell people, if you start with that age range, it's going to be really hard to initiate it, because you'll be like, well, what's going on? Like, nothing. What do you want to talk to me for? Like, it's very challenging to start with that, right? And I tell people, like, because that's what I inadvertently did it unintentionally, but I drive around and be like, man, I don't know anybody here. And then I pull up to some place and there would be a little playground situation in the middle of the complex. And then I walk past, and if there's kids there, they would immediately all stop what they're doing and run up to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of stuck now because they're surrounding me. And I got more comfortable doing that from their interactions. And then I slowly, I tried to use some segue to integrate to other older, like the brothers or sisters who are probably around the area, but not as accessible because they're not just hanging out at the playground or anything like that. But it slowly became more and more comfortable for me to get, I guess, used to doing it. And then pretty soon, over time, right, the elementary school age kids became the middle school kids, and they became the high school kids. And now they're like the parents of other kids. And I don't know. I think the investment in time, like I was talking about, you have to, if you put it in the beginning, the return is huge at the end. And as long as it's coming from a good place, and you're not just doing it because somebody's telling it. I guess you could still do it if somebody's telling you, but it's not going to be as I think it's more, people can tell more when it's like that. Their perception is like, you're not doing this because you want to, you're just doing this because somebody's making you. And I think people can pick up when it's not coming from the right place. But anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what I love about what you just said is that you identified an area of weakness in yourself, and you decided, instead of being comfortable in that place, that you were going to change it and you were going to challenge yourself, and you found a way to do it. I think that's amazing. And a lot of people don't do that. They just get comfortable with their traffic stops or with just sort of being whatever, answering 911 calls, and they don't take that extra effort to get better at things that they might not be great at. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I didn't initially think of it. Part of it, I mean, honestly, I could say, yep, I just wanted to work on a weakness, but I mean, part of it was just boredom too. I was like, man, nothing wrong with doing those other stuff, but I already did like a lot of them already. So I was like, what else is there to do, right? And then, yes, like you said, part of me was like, well, this aspect of our job is actually very important for a lot of reasons. And I feel like if an officer is working in an area, I'll tell all our student officers the same thing, is what are the components of defining if that officer is a good officer or not? Like what things define that? And of course, people would say, well, that they do their job safely, they do their job with empathy, and a few other things, like just the common things people typically say, right? And then if they didn't say it, I always add in, well, to me, if an officer, besides those things, which are all important, the officer, I think, can be defined as, oh, that's a good officer if they know the area that they work. How well do they know it? Like if it's just like, well, I know this street is over here and that house is over here, that's good. That's better than not knowing that. But like, what else? Like, who lives over there? What is that person's family? Like, Do they have brothers or sisters? And then you can keep going on, right? And so I think the joke in the end, when I really started getting into that deep dive into the outreach and just getting to know people, it would be almost like if they had a bulletin of some wanted person in my area, they would, if I was sitting at their briefing room table, they would like just ask me first, and they wouldn't even ask anybody else. And you know, I took a little bit of pride in that. I was like, okay, I'll go. Can you identify this person? Email comes out, like if it's in my area, I should know who that is. So I don't know. I just took I guess you could look at it like I took ownership of a thing that was initially a weakness of mine and developed into something that I guess kind of now is what I'm a little bit known for.
Mhm.
But that only happen like any other thing that you want to improve, right? You have to purposely make yourself in an uncomfortable situation to basically acclimate and get used to it. And eventually, if you put in the time and you're approaching it in a way that is correct, you should be able to, it might not become a strength, but it for sure will be better than what it was.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I mean, I think that's one of the major leadership traits is to take ownership of your weaknesses. And then once you have ownership, then the expectation is that you're doing something about them. And then I think another takeaway that I thought was really cool is, you know, you kind of talked about how important it is to be genuine. And that is so true. If you're going to sit there and try to communicate with kids and you want it to be as the least awkward as possible, you know, you're not going to talk about something you know nothing about. If you don't know about Pokemon, you're not going to talk about that. So I love that you used your history of playing brass instruments and skateboarding, probably two like the most random things, but you're able to like utilize those to put on a genuine front and also connect. And I think like if officers are able to just kind of look, okay, what are my interests? What can I speak to that would be of interest to a kid as well? I think we can all find something. Like for me, maybe sports, for Lexi, maybe something else. And I think that's a huge takeaway.
Yeah, if you don't like trombone, then there's no way you can fake pretending to like that, right? And you're gonna just sound like an idiot, right? You sound like you don't know what you're talking about, and it'll probably make you even less credible, right? As a person who's trying to pretend like they like something when they don't.
And it's definitely not the coolest thing that you would want to pretend to really be good at, you know?
Well, trombone is the coolest instrument. Let me just put that. I mean, there's no other instrument that comes close to as versatile as trombone. Like seriously, like any genre of music, you can have a trombone in it. Classical, jazz, punk rock, ska, rock and roll, you know. So it is the best instrument, but it is also like the other neat thing was that a person's interest and hobby, you don't have it's very organic and genuine, and many times it's like they don't always overlap. I mean, I always felt like when I was a kid in middle school, especially, I had two almost conflicting interests. I had something that was music, which when I was growing up in Oahu, in the school that I went to, which is not a bad school, it's a good school. I intermediate was the popular thing to do was definitely not be connected to music. Let's put it that way. And skateboarding was not really like back then. It was more of a not underground, but people. It was not on ESPN. There was no medals or competitions. It wasn't going to be in the Olympics, and it's kind of like punk rock. Like people who were outcasts in regular life did that, and then so I was doing this thing that was kind of like two not opposite but very contrasting things, and I don't know. I never felt like I fit in because of that. Because I was like, oh, I like trombone, but I also like skateboarding, and I didn't see anybody other musician, not classically trained musicians anyway, doing both. And I just felt it made me feel weird all the time. And then now it's like, well, it's almost it's a huge benefit because a lot of times those different groups that do those things do not overlap. So I get to use those two hobbies and interests that I organically already have to connect with two populations that I would not otherwise have connection with in any other way. So when I moved up here, there was a program in the school district called the Vibes program in Bellevue School District, which there's an acronym for something, but they connect volunteers to different subject matter in the school district. So I got connected right away to the middle school band program at Tillicum, and Mr. Rubish, Andy Rubish, who's now the international band teacher. I got to meet, and again, I kind of initially went back to this idea of there's no person in the city I'm going to know, so I'm going to get to know people, because I indirectly wanted to have a job. So I was like, I got to, the more people I know, that can only be better. And how do I get to know people really, really fast? It's like, well, I could use my interest in music, volunteer for this Vibes program on some of my days off, and I get to meet a whole different population that I would have never otherwise met in an environment that would be not negative. And that's kind of what it ended up being. And then the skateboarding, I forget, that just happened like several years afterwards, but same thing, we have a city-run skate park, that indoor skate park, which I was told one of the oldest indoor parks in the country, that runs skate camps out of there. And then they have staff who skate, working for the city, organizing these camps. And then it's like ridiculous, like a year round, it's fall, winter break or spring break, and then summer camps, multiple summer camps, and 24 kids from all over the place skateboarding for Monday through Friday, 3 hours a day. And I show up with my work clothes on, and it almost looks like a fake, like a skit or something. Yeah. and I think it was Lexi, when you mentioned like the kids, or that woman who did that email in the beginning, it was exactly like how you said. They would see my car, or the first day of camp, people are like looking at me kind of like, why are you over here? The parents, if they're still there, included, and even the staff in the first couple ones. And then by the end of I think probably by the fourth or fifth camp, it went from that to, yeah, you're going to be here at the next one. You're going to, and if I didn't show up, they'd be like, hey, how come you weren't at the camp? The last camp, what happened? Like, what did you have to do? And it's funny how it's so, one of my goals, or I guess from working in patrol, where you have to have your uniform, it's hard to see past the uniform, right? Like some people will not do that and are not able to, but for everybody else who is able to have like an open mind, my goal was to make people not even, as if I'm not wearing it, like talk to me like I'm not even wearing it, which is super hard to do. But I think it helps when you do it through a means that is something you enjoy.
Well, you referenced like, people unsure of like why you were at the skate park to begin with, that kind of thing. And I know that we've all dealt with parents who are like, why the hell are you talking to my kid? Don't talk to that cop, who just don't like law enforcement. They don't care why you're talking to the kid. You could be trying to hand them a sticker or whatever the case is, like telling them you like their baseball hat or something. And I mean, I know Lexi's experienced it. I've experienced it many times, and I'm sure you have as well. Like, how do you move past that? Or do you just kind of chalk that up to, all right, like this person's not in the mood? How do you not let that affect your motivation? Or do you try to counter it with something in the moment?
That's a good question. I think I mean, that's definitely not a thing that makes people motivated to continue to want to do that. It feels very frustrating, and especially if a person is coming from a good place, right? I think it depends on the situation. So if at some point, I think it doesn't take super long to determine if a person is going to be open-minded or not. I mean, they could initially be hesitant or against contact, but if I'm able to, I just try to use my perception to say, okay, this person is going to be having that view no matter what. And if that's the case, then I mean, there's nothing anybody can say anyways that would change that person's mind. So I don't know. I just try to focus. To me, that kind of interaction or situation has luckily for me been very infrequent. It still has happened, but I just focus on the other majority of the contacts, which I like to think are really good. So
yeah. I mean, I get it. Yeah. You just sort of have to, like you said, gauge the situation and then kind of move on. Don't dwell on that one experience. And even though we all are like, man, that feels so shitty, I'm just trying to be like a human being. And but you're absolutely right. I mean, there's far more good that you're doing than just those few negative experiences.
Yeah. You're not gonna be able to change everybody's mind. And like I said, I think in even almost anywhere, you could the majority of the context, if you're coming from the right place, if it keeps happening enough, it's going to be a majority good. I mean, maybe I'm too optimistic about that, but there's going to be more good interactions than bad.
That's a very Star Wars, like good will triumph evil approach, and I like it.
And you are very clearly a leader in your community with the kids and the parents, and I think that is amazing. And you have also become a leader in law enforcement to your fellow officers, not only with your engagement in the community and like modeling what that should look like, but also in being the best officer you can be in defensive tactics, knowing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training in your uniform. And I know I've seen a big shift in sort of how people have been talking about that in the last, 3-4 years. I think it's very important. Both Callie and I are of that opinion. You should train every day a little bit in something. When did you get into jiu-jitsu?
That's a good question. Oahu, the state of Hawaii, has probably per capita, one of the highest populations of martial artists per general population in any state. I would almost say for sure, just because of how much influence from other countries, like pretty much every country in Asia has a representative in Hawaii. And so every discipline from all those countries is there. And jiu-jitsu was probably Hawaii was one of the first states in the country that had a jiu-jitsu influence besides California and probably New York City. Like those are probably the only 3 places in the 80s that people were doing what we now know as Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I did martial arts when I was a kid, but I think I stopped wanting to be a ninja when I started skateboarding. I just wanted to be a skateboarder after that. And then I wanted to be I didn't want to be a band geek, but that's what I ended up being anyways. And then several years passed, and once I started doing this job, I was like, oh my gosh, our academy in Honolulu did a good job of exposing us to the benefits of having some kind of understanding of close quarter stuff. Any grapple related art would be advantage. I mean, that was very clear to me from before that, but they did a good job of at least introducing some positions like the guard, which I completely didn't understand what that was for, because nobody told us. They said, oh, this is how you open it. I was like, why would I be in danger from this position in somebody's between somebody's legs? Like, this is ridiculous. And I didn't even understand. So I had one exposure to jiu-jitsu at work. There's a lot of people who teach that are very supportive of our work. I would say anywhere. Well, I assume anywhere. In Washington, it's the same. Like people who teach are very open to having law enforcement as students. And the one instructor in Kaneohe, his name is Ron Shiraki. He was a brown belt back then, but now he's probably like 3rd or 4th degree black belt under Helson Gracie. And he invited me to stop by his gym, which is in our area, in my district. And I went and I sparred with this. I had the whole class with the group, and I ended up sparring at the end, like typical classes. And then I remember like, wow, my goal was, I just don't want to get submitted for my sparring session. And I didn't get submitted. And in a 5-minute round, I was like, I didn't get submitted. I was in the closed guard the whole time of my training partner. So I was like, oh, that's good. I didn't get submitted. And then I was thinking, oh, wait a minute. I also didn't do anything to this person. Like I didn't do anything. I was stuck. In the top position in a person's guard with their leg crossed behind my back. And it's like, man, that's not reassuring too, because I didn't get submitted, but I also didn't do anything to a person who I was on top of. And so I was like, man, and I asked my training partner, like, wow, that was really good. How long have you been training? And he said, a couple years. I said, oh, okay. How old are you? And he goes, 13. And then I was like, man, I'm like 28, late 20s, in probably what I would consider my best physical shape. And I was being controlled by a 13-year-old.
Were you like, man, I am done connecting with the youth. I'm never talking to kids again.
That was before I started doing that. So I was like, no.
Okay.
But then when I moved up here, luckily our department had in Hawaii, unfortunately for the officers there's no way you're even entertaining the idea of going to any kind of outside department training. Like that doesn't even exist. I mean, it exists if you take your own vacation and your own everything and pay for everything. but you want to do it on the department's time. That's unheard of. If it's out of state, you would be there's so unheard of that it wouldn't be even an entertainable idea to consider out of state training on your own. I'm sorry, with the department's paying for anything of it, or even giving you department like work time. So coming from that to working over here, a lot of training opportunities, a lot of lots more training in general, and lots more opportunities to attend as a job. I was like, oh my gosh, like let me try Google jiu-jitsu and police or something. I forget what exactly I searched, but I ended up coming across one of the courses that Henry and Hito and Gracie teach called Gracie Survival Tactics. Back then it was called Gracie Combatives for Law Enforcement, and it was in Torrance. I was like, oh, Southern California. Like, let me put in a training request and see if I get approved for it, because we didn't have any jiu-jitsu people in our department at the time. That was pre my coworker Larry Pereira, who's like super good, and a lot of there might have been wrestlers, but there was nobody in a training capacity that had grapple jiu-jitsu background. So like, oh, I'll be that person. And of course, I didn't have anything, and I was like, I knew at that moment that if I didn't have any actual tools to supplement what I had on my belt, I mean, I'm tiny, I'm not physically imposing, and just by physics, I need some other thing besides my strength, because I forget what age I was, but I was like, man, I'm not going to get any stronger. I mean, I might be able to maintain and increase a little bit, like a pound or two in my bench press, but it's plateauing already. I'm going to have to maintain, and then eventually, like 20 years from now, it's going to go down. So I need something else. I need like some technique, and I saw the testimonials by other officers talking about the course. So I put in, and I actually got the training request accepted, and so I got to fly down to Torrance. So my first exposure to jiu-jitsu, besides that 13-year-old boy shutting me down from being able to do anything to him, was at their school in Torrance, and it was amazing. That the whole is a week-long 30-hour course, and it was specifically for law enforcement. So there's from a law enforcement lens, so like handcuffing transitions and weapon retention. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the best possible introduction I could have probably had. And then that just became my hobby / job related necessity. So that, and then eventually, like right now, it became something that is also an outreach. So self-defense is a universally needed thing, I think, for any age range or group. And so that's another one. It's like I joked to somebody, I was like, all I'm doing is making all my hobbies into outreach. That's it. That's all I'm doing. And everyone that I have a real good interest in, I just say, oh, how can I use that to connect with some part of the community? And the self-defense is huge, because everybody wants to have the ability to protect themselves. And I feel like it's even better that I'm not a 6'2", 250-pound person, because it's like, well, if this person can do it, then I can do it. And so it's been, I think this year is my 12th year of training on and off since 2008. And I don't know. It's just weird how that worked out like that. And, that's now amongst the list of things that I use to connect. And it's great when you can have a thing like that, where it's multiple, it accomplishes multiple things at the same time. It's a functional job, as a skill set, an asset for that, and it's a way to connect. And I'm in a position that I can do that in. So it's like I have all the pieces, and we have like a community that is receptive to it, and we have, I think I was gonna talk about, well, I do the outreach, and a lot of times, maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but I do the outreaches, activities, and even some of the trainings that we have hosting different martial artists to our station. I usually end up just scheduling it without asking anybody, and then it happens. And then afterwards, like, oh, that was a really good training. I think, yeah, that was really great. Like, luckily, nobody told me no, And then it's too late right after that point. So, and then I do another one, and same thing. So, another takeaway I've learned from doing all of those things is that old saying of the better to ask for forgiveness and permission. Is that one is because I can guarantee if I had asked before for certain ones during certain times, I would have probably gotten told no. Or I would have had a raised eyebrow. Like the self-defense teaching, when we do it as an outreach, that happened because of a person in our community center who is, I think, now retired, Judy. She thought it was a great idea And she's like, yeah, let's make a flyer for it. I'm like, well, hang on, I gotta have like approval first. She goes, no, we don't need approval. So she goes to our graphics department, has them make a flyer with my picture on it with like self-defense classes every Wednesday, and she starts handing them out to people. And she starts emailing like internally in the city, like, hey, we're doing self-defense class at the Crossroads Community Center, you guys, every Wednesday afternoon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what if they say no? And the funniest part was, at somehow our interim chief at that time had emailed me, and I was like, and then he put the heading, or I forget, it was like forwarded, it said self-defense. Like, oh crap. And I opened it and it said, hey, this person who is in our city emailed me asking about the class, and they wanted to know if it was, what was the age range? And then I was like, oh, well, I mean, we decided it was going to be like 12, 13 years old or older. He goes, oh, okay, great. And I say, well, that I guess I got the blessing then. I got the. So it was crazy how that ended up being the thing, because that was before even risk management, even like, actually, no, I'm sorry. That was I don't want risk management to get mad at me. I actually ran it by our risk management, Pete and Mike. Our risk management people are amazing. And in the DT room downstairs, they actually, like, those guys are kind of off, I think. Like they volunteered, Pete volunteered, or Mike, I forget who, they volunteered to get tasered. They volunteered to get put to sleep. It was like, oh, this is like the craziest risk management I've ever seen. But we compared to what it was before, it was like a huge benefit for us, right? And of course, it's still safe and everything. They're not gonna like do anything reckless. But I ran the idea by them, and they said, yeah, I don't see any problem. After I showed them what I was wanting to teach, which is stuff from the Gracie Bulletproof curriculum. But that was before there was actually approval. So I got the blessing from risk management for the idea of it. And I went to the community center person, Judy, and she's like, yeah, let's do it. And then she starts sending out all these informative like flyers about it. And then the chief found out afterwards. And then he, I mean, I don't know. I think at that point, it's like the momentum was too much to be like, no, we can't do this. So it just ended up being a thing. And like, I don't know. It's just that one was like a life lesson of sometimes you just gotta, what is it? Ready, fire, aim, or whatever, people call that.
Yeah, I think I'm picking up what you're laying down, which is like, yeah, you want to go through the chain the way you should, but also like, it doesn't really matter if your heart's in the right place and you're doing it responsibly and that kind of thing.
Well, and also I think your chain must see what a benefit you are to their department in general, just with all of your outreach and just how many people know you. I think I talked to one of your recruiters one time who said after you started getting big on Instagram that they had zero problem getting officers applying to Bellevue PD, and they met their requirements without any problems, which is unheard of right now in this climate. So I think that's just amazing that you.
Yeah, I take zero credit for that. I mean, that's our department being our department and our community being our community. All I'm doing is I'm showcasing it. That's it. Like, I cannot invent something that's not like real, or, I mean, I'm not that good, and my editing skills are very white belt, and I'm not able to compose something that's not real. So I just showcase what we already doing. I think that's what we were not doing. We're not showcasing what we were doing, which is really good, and what we have, which is really good. So that's all. And
so let me ask you a question in that vein, because I know that traditionally, I'm not talking about any department in particular, but traditionally officers, departments are very wary of sharing what they do with the public. And I think that's something that we fall short of a lot of times is just sort of showing the good things that we're doing. And then the only time that people see things that happen with the department is when something bad happens. So was there any like pushback when you started doing that, or how did that ball start rolling? Or was it one of those like ask for forgiveness, not permission things?
See, I shouldn't probably divulge. When you guys going to air this? Like probably next year, right? Next year.
It's live streaming right now. I hope that's not an issue.
Oh no!
You don't have to divulge anything you're not comfortable. You can speak in generalities too.
Yeah. In the beginning, you're right, Lexi. Like our profession in general, if we have to make generalizations, we do we don't do a good job at all of showcasing what we do that's good. Like it's like terrible, like, because we don't, I think there's part of it is due to like the fear of something coming out that's not perceived right or taken the wrong way. So I think the overreaction is, well, we're not going to share nothing then. We're not going to share anything. And the huge obvious downside of that is you can't share good stuff. And I think that's the one, I understand from an administrative standpoint how if you're going to regulate, if you leave it to the officer for their discretion to decide what is okay and what is not okay to share, then some officer is gonna do or post or say something that's going to be either misperceived or straight up wrong, and then that's going to obviously cause huge issues, which will make the administration in turn go, you know what, can't share nothing anymore at all. And I think I understand the reasoning. The problem is, like, in that context, you can't share any good stuff. So if our department had a social media policy that said, well, you can't share anything in your uniform, there would be none of this. Like, there would be no, I wouldn't be on any person's podcast. There would be no articles, no stories, nothing. And I think I think the department can recognize, like, wow, this is a asset when people are using it in the right way. And that's all I try to do. I think my filter is pretty good so far. I haven't posted or shared anything that I think people would be like, oh, that's terrible, you got to take that down. And I think I have a pretty good one. I use the if my mom can look at it and be like, oh yeah, then it's okay. So or if it's like PG or G, then it's okay. But yeah, it's hard when people don't have the ability to use their own discretion, because you cannot share good stuff. And we already know all the negative stuff or negatively perceived things will be shared anyways. So if you have a inability to share anything good, it will be a complete imbalance for perception. So if I didn't do what I do, I would be like, wow, what's going on? Like, everything is out of control right now. Like, what are these officers doing nowadays? And I don't even blame people now for thinking that, because that's what it looks like. And I'm not saying any incident in particular or anything, but if you don't have the balance to it, which I feel like we don't, because we don't share stuff. Like, we typically do not share anything. We save people's lives. Like, even our own coworkers don't know about that. Like, it's hard. I think that's the one thing that if we're talking about, not just from a public relations standpoint, but the communities, they love to know about good stuff that the departments are doing. And like the question is, how do they find out about it? Like, you go into the community meeting and you can show a slideshow and a PowerPoint. That's one way, but it's only going to hit like 30, 40 people. And then you got to go to another community meeting and do it again. Or you can have a platform of some kind that showcases it, right? And I think it's hard when there's like negative perceptions from people in the community who use the platforms to like kind of slam the department, right? That's a very challenging situation. But I was like, well, I can do it on my own platform. And luckily, like, I have the discretion to do it and the trust to do it. And our department policy allows it. And I honestly started doing it just to share with my own friends, like, hey, this narrative that is being shared by the national media is something that is in contrast to what I am actually experiencing first person as an officer. And that's how I started doing it. I was like, I could just let at least my 50 friends from Hawaii and here know that good stuff is happening, at least with my interactions. So they have a little bit of balance instead of just all negative.
When you keep it, I think a big difference between your account and some of the other police accounts I follow is that you keep it positive 100% of the time. And that is huge, because I think we have such the career in general just sort of gives that negativity bias, all the things we see, but you are constantly keeping it positive. And I think that that's attractive, not only to law enforcement, but to the community.
100%. Yeah. It's our job is, if you think about it, especially patrol, the only things you're going to is people in crisis. There's no other kind of call. There's no call of anything else except negative stuff, or not negative, but things that are not going great or not going not good. So, I mean, everybody else gets to see those ones anyways, like I said, from the other posts. And if a person just chooses to share that, I feel like there's already those accounts out there. I don't have to create another one. And I tell people kind of half jokingly that the outreach, the positivity, like interactions and the things that it looks like I'm trying to perpetuate, it's partially me seeking it out to have therapeutic value for me. And
Absolutely.
it refills my cup, because I mean, whatever it is, like serving dinner to the community or whatever. We need, if I don't have that balance in my own brain, I'll lose my mind, and I need to have some kind of reset, and that's what the outreach and a lot of the situation does for me. It's a reset to remember that, okay, there's still good people, there's still good young people, there's still good middle-aged people, old people, right? We don't get to meet them if we do 911 calls only. So for my own selfish reasons to make my mind not all cynical and callous, I'll have to seek it out myself. And of course it's fun too, but yeah, that's another thing. That was a huge piece too. I in reflecting, I was like, you know what? I'm partially doing this to just keep my own sanity and for therapeutic purposes personally.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't agree more. Hence why we have this podcast. And, to go back to something you said earlier, which is all you've done is you've made your hobbies a form of outreach, and you've used those as a form of outreach. And I mean, we couldn't be more happy to know that someone like you is on the streets of Bellevue holding it down. I think that's great. So if people want to, if they're not already following you and they want to check out a little bit about what you're talking about, what is your handle for them on Instagram?
Yeah, it's just my name, Craig Hanaumi, CraigHanaumi. And there's a Facebook page equivalent of it. And I don't know. I just put it out there, and it's like I tell people, Instagram is like a visual portfolio for a person if they wanted to be that, or for an organization or a group. And you say, what is this about? It's like, here's what I'm about in a visual format, picture, video. It's that's literally what it is. It's just showcasing stuff that I like to think represents what I do.
Awesome. Lexi, you have anything else for Craig?
They should have your nickname should be the future.
No.
Because you should be the future of law enforcement. I think everything.
I'm too old to be the future. The
Yeah, but you
future
still look young.
I appreciate that. Well, if my coworker Raph Park were here, he would say Asians don't reason, but I don't know if that's PC. I don't say that. But
well, you can say that.
I can say that, and apparently nobody can get mad at me. But I don't know. I think it's neat what you guys doing too. I don't have an LLC, but I like that you guys using you parlaying your guys' careers into something else, because there's lots of crossover from what we do in law enforcement. I think that could apply to the civilian side, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And you guys are, I think, I don't know. If I did it, I would just be like, oh, you're just copying you guys now. But yeah,
no.
We're just copying other people, I'm sure. So
that's exactly right. It's flattery, right? Isn't that what imitation
right.
is?
Yeah.
Well, Craig, I'm going to try to select some cool brass music as an outro for this, maybe some ska, but to lead us out. But thank you again so much for taking the time. And we hope that we can have another chat with you and catch up in the future.
Oh, for sure. We're going to have a training session, chat, whatever. And
mother of God. I can't wait.
You guys,
just tell me when.
Yeah. Anytime, you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cool. Take care.
Thank you.